But a lot of people are very concerned that the government is U-turning and moving away from the Freedom Day that it was supposed to be on the 19th. Are the government, though, right to continue to reduce or release us from the restrictions?
Do you mean, do I think they should maintain the restrictions? If you do, absolutely, they should. We have case rates rising. If you look at the graph, it's getting close to vertical, the rate at which new cases are rising every day. We've had 51,000, nearly 52,000 people tested positive yesterday. This is rising very fast, even if only a small proportion of people have serious illness or complications. When you have very large numbers, that small proportion ends up being large numbers. And we know that...
Okay, I understand that, but I understand that, but then weren't we told that the reason for the vaccination process and the reason why we were holding out, if you like, with these restrictions is that the vaccinations were supposed to reduce hospitalizations and they were supposed to reduce deaths. So we had 49 deaths over the last 24 hours. I understand that cases are rising exponentially, but to my mind, that's kind of fine because the huge numbers of vaccinations. Otherwise, what was the point in the vaccination process?
Well, the process hasn't finished. We need to get a lot more people vaccinated. It takes 3 weeks from people getting ill to people dying. So we've got a lot of deaths baked in. And with rapidly rising case numbers, the numbers of deaths are going to double every few days until we end up with vast numbers of avoidable deaths. The government's got a process of herd immunity through disease. If it had waited a few more weeks, we could have got herd immunity through vaccination. But it's rushing ahead. Many younger people are not fully vaccinated, and you need to be fully vaccinated to protect against the Delta variant, which is prevalent now. And these people are...
But how many younger people, though, how many younger people have either died or had serious illness or complications as a result of
about a third of them
getting COVID?
About a third of them who get COVID have serious complications, long COVID, that leaves them disabled for weeks or months or years to come or causes permanent damage. That's not trivial. That's going to add up to a huge burden of disease, which will last for a long time. Young people don't tend to get seriously ill or die from the acute illness in the same way as older people do, although a proportion of them do, and a proportion of the young people who get sick will die from this. But a high proportion of them still have the long-term complications, which we are only just learning about. If we hung on another few weeks, if we'd rigorously enforced the existing restrictions and kept going with them for another few weeks, we'd be in a much safer place. Instead, we're the laughing stock of the world in epidemiological terms.
You say that, but then on the other hand, there are people who would say, okay, well, then if the restrictions that we have at the moment are not stopping the infections, what's the point of them? Because what you seem to be arguing for is if cases are rising exponentially, even if we did nothing, if we changed nothing, then it would appear as if the restrictions we currently have aren't working, in which case it would appear that you're arguing for harsher restrictions. Is that right?
Absolutely. We need to, at the very least, be rigorously enforcing the current restrictions. I haven't travelled on the tube recently myself, but I'm told that a significant proportion of people refuse to wear masks in the sort of place where you can guarantee that if somebody's infected, they'll infect several of the other people on the carriage. We're seeing reports already of large numbers of people...
I have been using the tube, and I would say that whilst there are one or two people in every carriage who refuse to wear them, most of the people actually are wearing them. And I guess
if you were in Germany, those people would be ejected from the transport system. People shouldn't get away with it. We're not enforcing it rigorously enough, and we probably need to go back and tighten up the restrictions. We've already relaxed them partly, but what has changed?
But we're hearing though that. Yeah, but we're hearing this continued discussion from the people up and down the country, though, that the suffering that people are having as a result of having their hospital appointments either cancelled or delayed, they're suffering as a result of the mental health problems.
Why do you think they're getting their hospital appointments cancelled or delayed? It's because the hospitals are filling up with COVID patients. We need to tighten the restrictions.
It's because the hospitals have been... It's because hospitals have been turning away and cancelling because they're worried about COVID, not
No,
because
it's
they're
because
actually
they're
dealing
filling
with
up
them. We've
with
got a few
COVID
thousand
patients.
people
They're
with COVID.
reopening their COVID wards. You're talking nonsense there.
Yes, there might be.
People can't get hospital appointments because the hospitals are full of COVID patients. What we need to do is tighten the restrictions,
They're
cut
not.
down
They're
the number
not
of
full of COVID patients. They are
Well, you're
not full of
obviously not
COVID
talking
patients.
to the
Yes,
same
there are
doctors that
more.
I'm talking to. But
Well,
I mean,
I understand that there are more patients. I get that, and I'm very concerned about it too. But I see this continual discussion, this rattling of the saber that we must be worried. You're
the
frightening
more
the
we
population,
relax the restrictions
and you look at the
too
numbers.
soon, relax the restrictions too soon, you get a lot more cases, and you have to have more restrictions for longer. It's false economy to try and open the floodgates.
You say that, but then look at the states. Look at the states who seem to have managed to open up. They're not wearing face masks in the same way. They don't have the same restrictions that we seem to have, and
they're
they
going
seem
to run
be
into
getting their
exactly the same
vaccination
problems
program.
as we are, with a lot more cases coming up. They're building up,
but it sounds
trouble
like
themselves just as we are.
You say that it sounds as if you're sort of doom mongering. The Royal London Hospital reopened its COVID intensive care unit on Thursday after seeing the number of patients almost triple in 2 weeks. I get that, but then if you're talking about that, we've got 67 inpatients across its 5 hospitals. So, if you're telling me that we have to shut down the whole country again off the basis of 67 inpatients or 49 deaths, well, you're living in cuckoo land.
Well, it's the other way around. This number is just the start of this next wave. You can see the numbers doubling every few days. You're ignoring the fact that this is going to turn into an absolute catastrophe. When we look back on this interview in 3 weeks or 2 months' time, you will come over looking really stupid for arguing for this relaxation of restrictions while case numbers are rocketing. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
Well, that's your opinion, and I understand that, and I defer to expertise. That's why we get you on air. That's why we ask the questions, because I want to hear from doctors and I want to understand. Now, compared to many of my colleagues who have actually been in support of a lot of measures, they've made good sense. But at this stage, I'm struggling to understand that if, for example, we're not seeing the rise in hospitalizations, which means that the hospitals can't cope. If at any stage they can't cope, then I agree with you. We've got to do something different about it. But the vaccination program, which has been going full pace.
Have you seen that cartoon that's been circulating that shows case numbers appearing to rise very slowly and people saying, oh, they're not going down, and then they rise a bit quicker and they say, oh, it's manageable, and then they rise much faster and they say exponential growth, but it's actually exponential growth throughout, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing case numbers doubling. Not only are they doubling every few days, but the rate at which they've been doubling has been getting shorter, i.e. they've been doubling more quickly. So we are.
Okay, so just finally to you, we've got about a minute. So just finally to you. Okay, so in your mind, we're heading towards catastrophe. What should the government do?
At the very least, ensure that we keep the existing restrictions and enforce them very rigorously. And we probably need to go back and enhance the restrictions as we did previously.